until they can kill the wall or whatever. And in the set where you're having Exalted be in the core set, it seems like you would want to, like, especially avoid defensive designs that just blew out Exalted.
Right.
So I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but that was one card where, when I read it, I was like, it's pretty weird for this to be in the Exalted set, and then the games I played definitely confirmed that. Well, the number of my opponents whose draws just went immediately down the toilet because of that card was quite high, and it's not like the card's even bad when they are on an Exalted draw. Like, just shut down your best non-trample creature. Not, it's not bad besides. So that card kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, but everything else that I was playing with and against seemed reasonably fun. So
yeah,
I had a good time.
Yeah, it was like the neck snap thing was just my deck was pretty Exalted heavy, so all I did was attack with one of my guys that doesn't have Exalted.
Yeah.
So that when they kill that one, then I can keep attacking.
Right.
Like, neck snap is a cool way to interact with Exalted, right? Like, you're...
Yeah, exactly. Or, destroy target attacking or blocking creature is like, that card's much better against... It just happens to play out much more powerfully against Exalted because there are going to be a bunch of combats over the course of the games you play where someone is attacking with exactly one creature, and then that card is much more powerful in combat when someone is attacking with exactly one creature.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a subtle design that's like, yeah, good against Exalted, but it doesn't scream out to you like, this card's insane against Exalted in the same way that, prevent all damage dealt in combat to this wall with flying.
Yeah.
It's good against Exalted,
Yeah. Alright, let's talk about some cards. Blood Reckoning.
This is another type of design that definitely appeals to casual or relatively newer players.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, anytime you do something bad to me, I get something bad back to you.
Yeah.
Really resonates with that audience, and I think there's a lot of pressure, especially in the core sets. I mean, in general, obviously, but especially in the core sets, to make a lot of simple designs that resonate with casual players. Because for a lot of people, this is kind of their first time picking up the Magic set, or one of the first few times. So these very clean and casual friendly designs, you want to have a lot of them, and this card definitely scores an A on that register.
Yeah. Reminds me of I want to say Circle of Flame, the red one that deals 1 to each creature when it attacks you. I saw a lot of people playing that thing, even though it just wasn't good.
Right. I mean, that card at least has some amount of upside against particular decks. It can be very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another card that reads much more powerful than it actually is.
Yeah.
Blood
Hunter Bat.
This card is, in contrast to the previous card, actually powerful. And
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good body, swings the race in multiple different ways. Any flyer is pretty valuable when Exalted's a thing. I mean, this is going to be, I would assume, one of Black's premier commons once we get a better sense of what Booster Draft looks like.
Yeah, I mean, Blind Hunter was insane, and this is an even better context for it. A good example of how powerful this card is, the guy at my pre-release that everyone knew adds to his sealed decks had 3 of these and 3 murders.
Sure. He just spots the best common and then starts adding them up. We had a guy at my store back in the day at Target like 12 years ago who ran ads. Yeah. And this was during Invasion Block, but he wasn't particularly good, so he was adding like cards that weren't good. So we would get done with these we would get done with these booster drafts where he would go, 1-2 or whatever, and he's like, "How could I lose?" And he shows me his deck with like 4 Ruhamdesians and 4 Sulamdesians. And I'm like, well, it's like, well, hey, I know you added because I know there weren't 8 of these things in the draft or whatever. And secondly, you lost because you drew a bunch of Ruham and Sulamdesians that you stupidly added to your deck. So that was pretty awesome just to add the stains,
Yeah, yeah. Vampire, sweet card.
Yep. Good flavor. Pretty simple, sweet design. I have a feeling this plays better with Exalted for some reason that I can't articulate, but it definitely, I guess because your extra creatures are a little bit more expendable.
Yeah.
In general, like you just need to be sending one person at a time, so you often end up, there's diminishing returns on your non-Exalted creatures. So this plays probably a little bit better. I'm never a big fan of this card in Core Set Limited. I think it actually is generally more powerful in regular expansions.
Yeah.
Because there's just generally speaking more ways to synergize this type of effect with.
Although this is a card with more tokens than the past.
Okay. Sure.
Like there's the call, the 4-mana thing that makes 3 guys, and the Captain of the Watch, and there's like 2 more. Gerard had this thing and a bunch of token makers in his deck. Said it was really good.
Sure.
And there's always like Mark of Mutiny.
Yep. I'm always apprehensive about putting these kind of cards in my Seal deck for Core Set Limited, because I feel so much of the game is just what is the impact of your individual cards.
Yeah.
Like, it's generally speaking much less about synergy and
one
much
card
more
versus
about,
one card.
Right.
Yeah.
And cards like this just have a habit of making your bad draws worse. And so I'm generally not a huge fan of playing cards like this in my Seal deck, but certainly in draft you can capitalize on some cards you're describing.
Yep. Cower in Fear. This card is pretty awesome.
Yep.
Like.
Yeah, I got rocked by this seeing it a couple times.
Like it's an awesome card, period, right? But then especially in this context where it's like a bunch of tiny exalted guys.
Yep.
And it's one-sided and an instant, so you can do a lot of cool things with it.
Yeah, it can ruin combat for your opponent in a number of ways.
Yeah.
And unlike Infest, the Onslaught kind of version of this effect, it's one-sided, so the opportunity it's basically impossible for this card to be bad.
Right.
There's certainly moments where it's not going to be that impactful. Certainly against some of the green decks, it's not going to be doing a ton. But
speaking of Infest and cards that people that aren't super competitive like, the classic like Wrath of God is why it kills your own guys too.
Yes.
And so I like one-sided like this.
Yeah, I mean you want to have a mixture of it. It's definitely
well, they can't bonfires.
Exactly. And there's also a class of players who the first time they discover Wrath of God plus no creatures on my side of the board. I mean, it's
barter and blood when you have 2 guys and I don't have any.
Right. It's definitely one of the for a lot of players that is actually first discovery. Like, aha! I figured something out.
Yeah.
Even though, it's silly to kind of think about it that way now, but like certainly for me, 15 years ago or 16 years ago, the first time Eugene Harvey did that shit to me, I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
That's like
this guy's
pretty
a genius.
This guy, and it turned out that he actually was a genius, but not for that reason.
Right.
But he also Armageddon tackled me a bunch of times. I mean, just all the hits.
Yeah.
So you want to have some one-sided stuff for the reasons that you're describing. They're just more appealing to casual players, but there's also something to be said for allowing players to discover how to capitalize on symmetrical cards.
Yeah.
So I think you just want a healthy mix of the two things.
Yep, I agree. Crippling Blight. Sure.
Kills a dude.
This is another card that's just like really simple design, makes a lot of sense. It's good. It plays a role.
Good core set design.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple, again, you don't have to reinvent the well every single time.
Yep. Dark Favor. Yeah.
This card's actually. I know I'm not actually not a huge fan of this thing in core sets just because it's just the extra line break and the extra sentence.
Yeah.
To me, does not seem worth. Like, why not just have Unholy Strength?
Exactly. I was just thinking that Unholy Strength and Holy Strength versus this and the other one, Divine Favor.
You communicate a little flavor, I guess, with these designs, but you also communicate some flavor with Unholy Strength versus Holy Strength. Black's about making its Howl from Beyond and making its guys better attacking, and White's about protecting itself. So those designs still communicate some flavor, and this is just it's just more text for a little upside. So I'm not a huge fan of this compared to just having Unholy Strength or something similar.
I mean, it's like you gain something and at the cost of something, right? Like it's just dependent on whether you think it's worth it or not, and you said you personally don't think it's worth it.
I mean, part of it depends on just like the total sum of complexity at common.
Right.
Like we're often doing like what is our word count on commons? What's our average words per common? And if your rate is relatively low, you can stomach having a couple of ones that are longer or a little bit more unwieldy than you would ideally like in a vacuum. So it's not just an issue of this individual design. It's like if this is the only card like to see of very simple and straightforward cards, it's probably fine to do this. In fact, it might be actually correct to ratchet up the amount of like extra little clunkiness at common. And the opposite is also true. If you are too heavy on these kind of designs at common, then you should probably be scaling back complexity in some spots too. So it's hard for me to offer to say decidedly what should happen because it kind of just depends on what the rest of the comic.
Yeah, it's super contextual.
But yeah, this sort of strikes me as not worth the baggage.
Sure. Diabolic Revelation.
It's very sweet, casual, friendly design that I assume is probably busted EDH.
I was going to say, it's got to be banned in EDH.
I don't know. Most games I've burned of EDH, someone's up to like 17 mana pretty early on in the game, so I assume it's pretty easy to win the game once you resolve this for 10 or whatever.
It's got to be banned.
You go get an early harvest plus whatever the hell you want to kill the rest of the table with.
Yeah, the art is sweet. The card makes sense.
Yeah.
It's in EDH. What else is there?
I should clarify. It's broken in EDH, I assume. I'm no
no EDH.
I'm no expert.
Somebody get Sheldon Menery on Skype.
Yeah. I'm no EDH aficionado, but based on what I've seen in games that I've birded, I assume this card's completely off the wall.
If Sheldon's doing any boot work in the future, then I am sure we'll hear about this one.
It's funny, I was reading, somehow I got linked the whole, his post about banning Gristlebrand in EDH or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he has a post that's like, we banned it for such and such reasons, and I think Sundering Titan was also on that list. And then he's like, and I should preface this, I love Sheldon, I really, appreciate that he's the driver for this format, but this still struck me as funny where he's like, we're going to continue to play test Kakusho to see, this should be banned. It's like, I'm just imagining this game of Sheldon and 5 other guys, this bowl of Doritos on the table, and they all have their Kakusho in play, or their Kakusho deck, I don't even know what that means, and they're arguing amongst themselves whether or not, Kakusho's power level is excessive, or, comparing it to other cards, or whatever. I just had this image in my head I could not shake. I'm just like, alright guys, we're gonna devote our next 8 hours to playtesting Kakusho and EDH. It's I don't even know what the hell that's supposed to mean,
you know what I always imagine the judge's game of EDH is like the professor's game from Rounders.
Right. Yeah, right. Yep.
And then Luis walks in or whatever, and it's just like, no, I don't play EDH. Like, no, come on. And then he just reads everyone's hand and plays perfectly for 2 turns and wins, and everyone's just like, whoa.
Yeah, it's also kind of funny to me because can I understand why Gristlebrand is overpowered in a format where you have 40 life? Yeah. Can I imagine Sundering Titan being super unfun in a huge multiplayer game where people are trying to cast their big spells? Sure. It's can I imagine Kakusho, I don't know,
draining for some?
I don't know, man. It's lost on me, but whatever. I mean, I'm obviously, like I said, I'm no expert on the format, so
me neither.
Maybe something's going on that I can't conceptualize. Maybe he gets looped too easily or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there's recurring nightmare loops or something.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Disciple of Bolas. I've not seen this card yet.
It's a good one. I think this card's reasonable tournament level card.
Yeah, this card's sweet.
It is quite good with Kakusho, so if we were on the fence about whether or not we needed to ban that bad boy before, this might be the straw on the camel, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so 4 mana, draw 2 cards, gain 2 life would actually be pretty reasonable. Black.
Yes, that card would probably show up in some tournament decks.
And this thing is way better than that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly...
Oh, it's another creature, never mind. I thought it was sack a creature. Another creature is a little, but...
I mean, it's certainly, you could imagine like birthing pod decks being in the market for this kind of thing at the minimum, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, imagine sacking the front side of a Drolf's Messenger.
Right.
That's just pure value.
It is value town, yes. So, yeah, I think this card's going to see a bit of tournament play.
Yeah, I would not be surprised.
Just because of pod decks alone, and then...
Yeah, you can actually pod Messenger into this, and then sack the front side of it.
Yeah.
Or the back side, I mean.
And I could imagine... I have a difficult time really seeing this card, seeing a ton of play in kind of in the abstract, but there's a lot of cards you can imagine putting where this card becomes good. It's very contextual. So
yeah.
In the meantime, for the time being, I think he's basically just going to be resigned to either a singleton or potentially a 4-of in birthing pod decks, and then from there, who knows where it goes.
It's a sweet design.
Very flavorful and reasonably splashy, spiky rare. So
yep.
I think this is a good use of a rare slot.
Distant Tomb, sure.
Yep. We actually, we argue about this effect a lot for WoW, about how much is the right amount to do, because it has the potential to be kind of variance reducing in a way.
To just get back the same guy over and over?
Yeah, it has a way of being... there's a nice moment in TCGs where it's like, you played something awesome, and it did something for a little bit, and then I kill it, and then gameplay moves on.
And now we play Magic from there.
Right. And too much of this effect can make it just too frustrating slogging through the same dude over and over again. But I do think having, you also want to be demonstrating kind of the fundamentals of the color pie in core sets, especially at the lower rarities. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a really fine design to do. It's just doing it in an excessive amount or at a power level that's too high can be a mistake.
Yep, I believe that. But I think a Distant Tomb is pretty standard.
Yeah, it's totally fine. Totally fine to print.
Duress, now, a card that, when I want to talk about context, this card is context.
I mean, back in...
It's as good as it is in context, right? Like, you can't actually look at it without seeing what you're getting.
Yeah, it's, back in, when I was playing, FNM level, like, before it was called FNM, I think, during Saga Block, like, Saga Masks was pretty much my first format that I played a ton of Standard for. And this card was no questions asked 4-of in any deck that could cast it.
Right.
Because you were just, there was Tinker and Bargain and Replenish were all, like, decks, that would, as fast as the combo decks were decks in Standard, and they all hinged around spells. So this was no question asked. You were playing this if you could cast it. And now, obviously, we live in a much different world where the creatures are much more powerful than they used to, and you don't die nearly as fast.
Mm-hmm.
So this card has gone from no questions asked main deck to, if this showed up in heavy amounts in people's main decks over the next change, I would be very surprised.
It's also like not a good sign for a format where Duress is an automatic 4-of.
Correct. Yes. Basically, I agree.
And the way that WotC's been moving, it's definitely been away from formats where Duress is good.
Yes. So it's definitely an awesome sideboard card in the same way it despises and whatever else.
Well, that's the other thing is there was just Duress and like Ostracize, but now there's like a million options everywhere all the time.
Yes. So you can be a little more precise than you used to be able to be.
Yeah.
But this will be a very good sideboard card at the minimum, and will probably crop up in a couple main decks here and there.
Yep.
But mostly a sideboard card in the modern era.
There's a Duskman Prowler. As much as it makes sense for the flavor, I actually don't like haste in black.
Well, they made an effort to move a little bit of haste over to black. I believe that started in Zendikar with the 2 black, 2 colorless Pump Shade that had haste.
Right.
And Rosewater wrote an article saying that they were going to...
Really? I didn't read that article.
Yeah, they were going to move haste into small amounts at black at common. I believe that execution was actually especially bad because you often cast him and then didn't attack.
Couldn't attack with him, yeah.
So like the next turn you would untap and play your 5th swamp, and then it would be the Abyss. You weren't going to attack with your 2/2 that turn, so it was actually kind of a funny execution for the first one in a while because it often didn't play like a haste creature.
Well, It's like Suspend, right? When they first made Suspend, they didn't have the haste tacked on, and
yeah.
so like when your guy comes off a Suspend, everyone like wanted to attack with it right away.
Right.
Like they just instinctively attacked with it, and like, no, that just came off Suspend. So then they gave it haste. That's like the backwards version of that. It's just like, it's a shade, I'm never attacking with it. On the first turn I cast it anyway. Let's give it haste anyway.
But I think the big reason to move it over to black is just, haste is a pretty sweet keyword, and it's basically at 4 rarities, just the jurisdiction of red, basically. Like white and green and blue get it, like white and blue basically get it never. Green gets it at higher rarity sometimes.
Right. Well, that's why what I was gonna say about not liking haste in black is green has such like identity issues. It's like it's by far the least defined on the color pie.
Well, I would say that it certainly doesn't suffer from that from its creatures. If it lacks definition, it's because of its spells. Green's creatures are definitely iconically green, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but they're iconically green. Like the best creatures aren't really iconically green, right? Like the creatures to me that are iconically green are like the giant guys, and besides like Primeval Titan, those aren't the guys being played, I mean,
I consider Thrun and Albino Troll to be pretty iconically green.
Sure, but like Strangleroot guys,
acidic slime I consider to be that's a very green card.
Sure.
I mean, there's examples or whatever. Not necessarily all of them are pointed towards tournament play, but like green has reach and trample and regeneration that they have no shortage of keywords that you primarily associate with them. Black basically just has fear, and they sort of moved intimidate
and regen.
But I think you will see more regeneration in green generally than black. Though yeah, regeneration is black's thing, but since they took away fear and basically made it intimidate and made it more universal,
right.
I believe black was definitely short on a creature keyword that is kind of iconically theirs. And given how little haste was going around in general, especially relative to like how sweet and popular it is, it makes sense to move it a little bit in small doses over to black. So
that makes sense. I just think like if you're trying to define a color by giving it an extra keyword, having it be the second color of a keyword, black is so not defined by its creatures and green is so defined by its creatures that my default for a creature keyword would be to push it to green. Also, I genuinely believe that green is like the hardest to design for.
I think white is way harder.
Yeah, white's also probably.
We were talking about this actually in the office today. That is, white. We believe white basically has the biggest lack of definition of any color in Magic, because all of its space is basically shared by other colors.
Yeah.
And it's got like this little creature theme, but that only comes through if you understand power level, because you understand like, 2 mana for a 2/2 with a couple powers is pretty sweet compared to this 2 mana 2/2 that only has 1 power and some other color.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other colors have parts of the color pie that are, very much iconically associated with them. So.
Oh, dude, an earwig just like fell off a shelf above.
A what?
An earwig. It freaked me out. It like landed on the desk right in front of me. Yeah, a little bug with the pincers that don't actually pinch.
Oh, I thought earwig like earwig squad, and I thought that was like, I didn't know that was actually a real thing.
Yeah, no, it's like a little bug. Like, I don't know what they're actual called.
I thought you were like you had this little earwig stuffed animal on your dresser or whatever that fell. Like that's a weird thing.
It's just like
a weird thing.
It's this bug that just scared the crap out of me.
Sure.
And now it's scampering around and I'm trying to kill it. Yep. Okay, before we talk about the next card, which is also a black card with Exalted, I want to talk about Exalted in black.
Okay. Are you just killing the bug back there or something? What's going on?
Yeah, I was trying to, but then it like ducked behind something. There we go, now I got it. Alright. Oh, thank God. I almost died. You guys almost witnessed me die on air. What was I saying? Oh, do you know the flavor for Exalted? Like what Exalted's supposed to look like?
What do you mean exactly?
Like, something with trample, right? It's so big that it just rolls over you. First strike is something like so fast that hits you before you can do anything. Haste is something that's so like fast and crazy that it just goes without warning.
Oh, sure. I guess the interpretation's a little bit loose, but I would guess it's something along the lines of people are inspired by your bravery and valor in combat or something like that.
Right, that's what I thought it was, but that's... things with Exalted are the ones are... They're not the ones that are being honored, they're the ones that are doing the honoring.
Right. I mean, that was the, if I remember my Shards flavor text correctly, I thought, like, the Bant tribe or whatever the hell they were called, I don't know if that's the right word, but they were about, like, I pick a representative for my town and you pick a representative from your town and they duke it out. It was some deal like that. Was part of the flavor justification.
Right, sure. That follows, but then why do things have Exalted? Like, duty-bound dead, I guess, it makes sense. You know, it's duty-bound, and so it's going to be loyal to whatever made it or whatever is around it. But how is this Prowler, this, like...
Well, here's the thing. I think...
ninja guy...
If I would guess, this would be what I would guess, is that they decided they wanted Exalted in the core set for mechanical reasons. It's a pretty sweet, simple keyword. But obviously Exalted is a fairly loaded term from a flavor, like, English language perspective.
Right.
So you just design the best that you can around the cards, that, you know, in the art that you can, and accept that there's going to be some weirdos, and that's just kind of the way that it is. We had this experience, actually, in Versus System, which was a Marvel and DC trading card game I worked on back in the day, where we had this mechanic for Darkseid, where he could basically, you could like sub guys in and out of play, and the mechanic was called Teleport. It was inspired by Darkseid in the comic books. Teleports around, it's like this intergalactic entity, and he teleports from like place to place or whatever. And then we decided that we liked the mechanic a lot and we wanted to do more of it, but the next time we were working on something where we wanted to put it was on Spider-Man, and the word teleport doesn't make any sense on Spider-Man.
Right.
We wanted the mechanic, but we didn't want to have the word teleport on a bunch of Spider-Man when he doesn't teleport in the comics. So we went back and changed the name of the keyword from teleport to substitute, which is much more broad and sort of generic.
Right.
So that way it was easy to rationalize putting it all over the place. So Exalted possibly suffers from some of that in this execution, where like you just want it in all the colors, but it doesn't make sense because the name was chosen because of the flavor of White Blue and the flavor of Bant. But you just try to name, like, Bound Dead is a very good example of, like, doesn't really make sense for a skeleton guy to Exalted, but the name and the art kind of carry it.
Yeah, exactly. As much. Right, that's why I'm willing to accept Duty Bound Dead. I don't get why this ninja cat burglar is...
Right, yeah, no, it's definitely weird.
Yeah.
But you have to just kind of suck up that you're going to have some of that when you just decide to refeature a keyword like Exalted. Like,
sure.
Bloodthirst doesn't necessarily make sense for putting in other colors, right? Like, Bloodthirst is very red-green, like it's evocative of either like these tribal savages or these animals in nature or whatever.
Right.
But you still wanted to have it in some of the other colors, so you just accept that there's going to be some weirdness because mechanically that's the functionality you want for that set.
All right. I guess it's just like a suspension of disbelief for... It
is definitely weird. I'm not arguing it's not weird.
Okay, fair enough. Duty Bound Dead, like a card that a lot of people dismissed, but I think anything with the word Exalted is good.
Yeah, any one-mana Exalted guy I think is pretty good.
And a one-mana guy especially. I mean, you remember everyone taking a Crescent Squire over like 6-mana bombs.
I think that was only a thing in Florida. I don't think that trend ever really got to other parts of the country, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's like Exalted, it's so good and it stacks so well that like you want, as soon as you have some, you want as many as possible. And then the fact that he has an ability, it's sweet. Like an ability that also is like amazing against Exalted, assuming they don't have a pro black guy or a guy with flying. But literally any words after exalted, it's going to be playable.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue of saturation too. Like, as you were saying, the more exalted you get, the